society has perfected the art of making people feel unnecessary.
Meet Meqa Smith, the founder of the Unforgettable agency and the force behind Inspiring. Meqa has done fantastic things in the recruitment industry and turned preconceptions on their heads.
The most interesting thing to me is that everybody that has used me so far, they all hate recruiters.
Meqa has nailed the art of relationship building and adding value to her clients with her transformative and unconventional approach to changing the way that employers think about recruitment.
Then it doesn't matter what your fee is, because it could be twice that and it could be fine with the client, or it could be half that and that could still not be low enough, because it's all about perceived value. You have to build the value for the candidate in the role in the same way that you have to build the value for the client.
Follow along to find out how you can change your recruitment services to provide more value and create deeper relationships with your clients.
Welcome back to another episode of Recruiting Better with me, Ben Browning, and this time I'm joined by Meqa Smith, the founder of the Unforgettable agency and creator of the Inspiring model. Meqa came to my attention, as she has done for many people through LinkedIn, in the way that she productizes and brings a completely fresh perspective to the way that she's built her recruitment business, which she's been running for almost 9 years. Meqa's background in marketing, brand strategy, and in corporate HR really inform her lens on the way that she approaches her work. And I wanted to share Meqa's story about how you can be better at productizing your solutions, create real change and challenging against the status quo in the recruitment industry, and bring maximum value to all of your clients. Meqa, I'm delighted to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben. I'm really excited about this one, actually. I feel like the stuff that you do for your clients on the front end is a lot of the similar things that I do for my clients, maybe on the back end. It's almost like you help the recruiters and I help the employers. And together we can help everyone.
Absolutely, that's absolutely the intention. So you've mentioned there kind of the work that you do at the back end, the work that you do with employers, the work that you do with candidates. It would be great if you could kind of give us a bit of a summary of, I guess the easiest place to start is what the Inspiring model is in a bit of a nutshell.
Sure. The easiest way to explain what Inspiring is, which is the word inspire, but with like the insp and the hire separately, is a cocktail or a fusion of the recruitment process and a sales and marketing process. So probably informed through the lens of customer experience as well. So you've got this multi-dimensional kind of mix of things. When you look at it, I'm able to communicate it to a client on a single sheet of paper. So it is very much in a framework at the simplest level. And I designed it kind of by accident because I had come from corporate HR. There's a long story as to how I managed to lose my career, but it involves a brush with the brick wall that is the traditional recruitment process. I then started a second career in marketing, and it was through that experience of working with small businesses, working with marketing and learning the fundamentals of actually building funnels and all that sort of thing, that I was then able to eventually help a client who wanted to hire. And I combined all of my experience being a frustrated candidate with all of the feedback and the research that I had done on what was frustrating small business employers with my combined skill set of corporate HR recruitment and building actually marketing funnels and processes. And that's where this all kicked off.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit more then, when you talk about those kind of key elements, the one in particular that stands out to me is this idea of customer experience and an experience of recruitment that is built for employers and for candidates, where often I tend to find, and people tend to feel as though the experience of recruitment is really built in silos. So recruiters build the process that they need internally. Clients are struggling to retain control of the process from their perspective. Very often, poor old candidate is left without any control over the process whatsoever, almost without anyone in their corner, although I know lots of recruiters will rally against that. So what does it mean for you to have kind of a process built around customer experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So the first part of my motivation to build this came very much from a place of being a frustrated candidate. I literally just found myself coming face to face time and time again with the absolutely no feedback experience. The like, oh yeah, you're pretty good, but you're not that good because of this like ridiculous thing. And in the process, I felt completely dehumanized. And having come from a corporate HR background, it's not like I didn't know how to apply for a job. It's not like I didn't know how to present myself. And I found myself every time I would go and look on a jobs board, it was like I needed to take a glass of wine with me and I needed to like fortify my self-worth, because just even looking through the ads was like a little bit soul destroying, because every job sounded terrible. It sounded depressing. It was full of jargon, full of nonsense. Like half the time I couldn't figure out if they were just trying to make an easy job sound hard or if it was just something that was well beyond my grasp. But either way, I was kind of sure I didn't want to work for any of these people. So even that part of it motivated me so much to change the experience. So my first priority was to change the experience for candidates for two reasons. One, because I wanted the people like me who had so much to offer, who could not get through the standard traditional process because of the way that it's built. I wanted to give them an opportunity to at least, put their hat in the ring. And two, because I had experienced firsthand and I will use this, strong language, soul crushing, almost soul destroying feeling of not being able to get a job. Having been a single mum, I mean, I had a corporate career behind me. It's not like I'm some kind of, supermarket shelf stacker. I literally couldn't get a job at all, like anywhere, doing anything. Like, because I was too overqualified for that, too underqualified for this, even though I had nearly 10 years of HR experience, it was like, well, you haven't done this one thing. And it was just so, so frustrating. And that process was devastating to my self-esteem, to my life, to my financial situation. So I knew very much firsthand from a candidate perspective that these things needed to be fixed. And at the very least, people needed to be treated with a level of respect. But then on the flip side, I knew what my clients were struggling with. My father ran small businesses my whole life. He ran software development companies, consulting firms, all sorts of different businesses. We had lots of employees. So I knew how critical finding those right people was. So, and I also, through my research, my conversations and all my work with small businesses, I understood their frustrations. And they were feeling equally, almost as badly as the candidates were, trying to use this process that just wasn't delivering the results that they were looking for. They felt overwhelmed by the wrong candidates. They felt like recruiters were too expensive and didn't deliver what they were really looking for, didn't really understand them. They felt like when they did hire people, they were the wrong people. So I tried to look at it all through the lens of what are they actually hoping to experience, and how can we use psychology and principles of marketing to bring that experience and turn it around from that horrible, frustrating one to more of an uplifting one, which got them the results they were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge what you've shared there in terms of the thought process actually, and the experience that you've personally had. I was thinking as you were talking about that a little bit about my sister's recent experience of being made redundant from one of the UK's biggest supermarket chains, where she'd been working in the IT department, quite a senior role, setting lots of very challenging projects that she was working on, and the difficulty she's had coming back into the workplace, and very similar challenges. And I'm sure we all know somebody who's been through that experience. It's interesting that a lot of the recruiters I speak to are more towards the beginning of their career, perhaps maybe in their first or even second or third job. So having had that, they had less exposure to that kind of experience. But I also know that lots of recruitment leaders I speak to recognize, even from their own perspective, why can't we attract better candidates? Why can't we attract more suitable candidates? Why can't we attract more candidates in general in some markets? And from the employer's perspective, as you say, absolutely as well, why are we struggling to attract candidates? We're taking all the steps, but it's actually the quality with which we're delivering those steps that is just so, which is causing some of the friction and the challenges.
For me, I could unpack my sort of lens on this later on when we talk about it. But for me, what it comes down to ultimately is just a failure to understand the principles at play. So there's a lot of incorrect assumptions on both sides about what should happen and how it should happen, and even why it's happening. And I love diet analogies because I've struggled with my weight and been on every diet under the sun ever since I was about 15, and I'm 45 now, so it's a long time. More recently, in the last, say, 5 years or so, I've sort of solved that problem for myself, and I'm very focused on my health and fitness. But I see so many of the same challenges in people who struggle with their weight. They've just been taught the wrong things. They're trying really hard, but they're doing the wrong things. And it's just so frustrating. I feel like so many parallels in the world of recruitment and employment.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things that you hear about all the time, where kind of there's this piece of the goalposts always moving. In terms of we were brought up to kind of be anti-fats in general, and then and then all of a sudden fats are, there's a different way of thinking about that, and I get it completely. And actually, yeah, you're probably right. And I guess the other complexity that that employers and candidates are working through at the moment, and recruiters perhaps could be helping them navigate more so, or will get real value out of helping them navigate, is the fact that in the last 3 years in particular, we've seen an absolutely seismic shift in the way that employees think about employers and the way that people think about the workplace. Is that also kind of part of the story for you?
It's a huge part of the story. And the most interesting part of the story for me is the part that nobody talks about, which is I firmly believe that people have felt quite similarly for many years leading up to the pandemic. But what happened is that the pandemic actually gave them two things. One was the time to stop, because they've been on the hamster wheel for so long, you can't get off. You can't stop and think about it. So one was that, they physically were removed from a lot of things they used to do, like literally stuck at home and having to think about things and experiencing like, oh, this is life without that, and like being able to see how they felt about that. Some people missed it, some people didn't. But the other thing that it did was globally, it gave everybody permission to take a bigger picture perspective on life and on everything that is involved in life. For the first time, that anything like that has ever happened in any of our lifetime, where it was such a significant event that affected the entire world, that brought people together in a way that they were like, wait a minute, I don't want to waste my life. Like, life could be over. I could get sick. One of my loved ones could get sick. Like, what are we doing? This is crazy. So I think, it opened up the opportunity to have that conversation, but it also gave us the time collectively. And I think that shift had started to happen a long time before that. And it's now just absolutely no putting the genie back in the bottle. But, I won't gas bag on. I'll wait for your next question because I could talk about the macro lens on why that's the case as well.
But I also think that is absolutely crucial to this as well, right? Is that you do have that macro lens, and everything that you do in your business in terms of those daily interactions with clients and candidates is driven by having an overarching sense of what dynamics are occurring in the employment kind of, what's happening, what shifts are happening in the employment dynamic currently and historically, and also whether or not, and we've talked offline about this, but whether or not everyone sees the implications of those shifts in the same way, whether or not everybody shares your lens. It's a lens that brings a conversation or brings a dialogue around what is happening, why are these things happening, and I guess takes you back to base principles, which feels like a really big part of your approach, which is going back to base principles and thinking, okay, how do we build an approach to recruiting? How do we build an approach to solving employers' problems when they come to hire great talent and candidates' problems when they come to find their next role?
Yeah.
Because that context, everyone's working within that same context, right?
Absolutely. And I think this is where I feel like I do have a fresh perspective on things. And I've been super, super lucky. And I do want to say that openly, that I have not had to be the breadwinner in my family. And that is an enormous point of difference. If you are the breadwinner in your family and you are currently a recruiter or you're running an agency, you have got a whole different set of challenges, which is head down, bum up. You don't really have time to take the big perspective and actually think about why is this happening and what could be different. So I have a lot of empathy for that, and I'm very privileged to be in the position to have had the time to do this. But every time that I would run up against a challenge, I would have to stop myself and go, why is this happening? And then peel back the layers of the onion. And I eventually got to the place where I was like, okay, if we start with the fundamental, irrefutable fact that human beings are still hardwired the same way now that they were back in the Stone Age. But if you look around, our world looks absolutely nothing like the world that we were designed to live in. So we have got on every level, not just within the workplace, but across every single spectrum of our lives, we have got an environment DNA mismatch. And it's causing absolute havoc with human beings. It's causing anxiety, depression, obesity, addiction, all sorts of physical and physiological challenges, relationship breakdown, just everything that you can imagine that you've heard of that's bad is caused by this, basically. So we're already starting as employers and recruiters from a place of dealing with people who are not operating the best way that they possibly could be operating. And then most people are completely unaware of this as well. So they don't know why they feel this way. They just feel this way, right? And there's not necessarily something they can do about it either because of the nature of the way that the world is. But the fundamental hardwiring that's the most important to understand in this context is that we are designed to live in tribes, 35 to 50 people, where every single individual has a key role in the survival of the tribe. And we are united in staying alive, basically. So death is the enemy, the shared enemy. We are hardwired for our own survival to contribute that value to the tribe and to fear our lack of ability to do so because we would be rejected by the tribe and left to die. So when you fast forward and you just think, okay, take that template with you, we still have that hardwiring. We still want to operate in that way. We're driven to operate in that way, but we don't have that anymore. So now not only is our family unit usually geographically dispersed or sometimes broken families or anything like that, but we've lost our communities. We don't have the local butcher, baker, candlestick maker. It's not enough now to be a high school teacher, which used to give you that place in your community, in your world. Now you've got to be a TikTok, Instagram specialist, write a book, have a course, do a thing. Like it's almost overwhelming what you have to do to feel like you're not disposable. Our society has perfected the art of making people feel unnecessary. Within the context of that, so now you're dealing with people who are desperately craving that sense of belonging to something where they have a key role, where they are necessary and they are safe. So within the context of that, you've got this massive, the industrial era and manufacturing and massive big business that's just rolled on that has been able to just basically churn through human beings because there were always more of them and they always needed money to survive and never have to worry about any of those things that we've just talked about. Everything that was designed to serve big business was designed off pretty much the back of scientific management principles and Taylorism, which were all about breaking down work to the smallest possible part, having roles on the production line where people could just do the one thing over and over. It was easy to train them. It was easy to know what was in their job description. You think through all the people practices that we have today, even recruitment, and they all hark back to that era. Now, the problem is back then you had a large willing workforce who had absolutely no other option. And, they would come to work and it was heads and hands, that's all you needed out of them. So you could kind of make that work for you. But then as everything's progressed and gone, more and more technologically focused and more knowledge work is required and more judgment is needed. And there's a whole different way to create value now. It's not widgets so much. It's innovation, creativity, service. All of these intangible kind of things is where most of the value is created for most of the smaller businesses. We need a different thing from employees, and employment itself is a different thing. So we're still trying to do the same things that we did before, but it's not working for us because we're doing those things. It's going to get us the factory mentality people, and it's going to put them into the mindset of tell me what's on my job description and I clock in and I clock out. So what people want and crave desperately is that sense of purpose and belonging, but what they're getting is dollars and hours and policies and tasks. And so as a result, one of the emotional centers in our brain called the seeking system is switched off. So the seeking system is responsible for intrinsic motivation. And when you have a sense of purpose, a sense of self-expression, and a sense of experimentation, it switches on. If you think about it, most jobs and most recruitment processes are the exact opposite of that. And so what we end up with is learned helplessness. What we end up with is quiet quitting. What we end up with is people who don't want to work. So all of these things are at play quite before we even start talking about your ATS or how you wrote your job ad or anything else. The whole value proposition of what it means to be employed is where we need to start. And we need to understand as an organization that it is still an option for us to hire heads and hands, to operate in scientific management principles. And that's okay. We can still do that, but we just have to understand what we're doing. We have to understand and appreciate and accept that is fine, but we can't do things like that and then expect people to go above and beyond and think that if we put pizza in the canteen, it's going to spark engagement, right? It's not. So we just have to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we do want the other thing, we've got to have a different strategy, and that's why I designed Inspiring.
I love it.
Winning high quality new business is more difficult than ever. And as you know, we are strong advocates of using email in your BD outreach. But we also know that using email outreach campaigns is more and more difficult. Google and Yahoo have upped the bar in terms of what they consider to be spam. And so working to create great results from email campaigns is more and more difficult. And if you're sending messages at volume from your primary domain, you really need to be worried about domain health. Not to mention the fact that only the most hyper-relevant, hyper-tailored content is going to get the kinds of responses you want from your clients. Our partner Outstation does all of the heavy lifting for you. It's an amazing tool that runs end-to-end services from data collection through segmentation, through using AI to really target and get specific about who you're sending messages to. Is a real game changer in terms of the way that we use both a combination of technology and that human touch. Outstation goes a level beyond anything that we've ever seen before. And we've got clients all over the world in different sectors across recruitment who are getting fantastic results just from using the tools at Outstation. If you want to check it out, head to the show notes. There's a link there for you. And if you go through to their page, they will give you 15% off a discount from your first order. So go check out Outstation, change your results from your email campaigns, and it'll help you win more business.
Look, I want to bring that back to, because I see a real parallel and a real analogy and a real clear instance of that in the recruitment industry. So as a recruitment consultant, and I think this is largely well known, a kind of a relatively common feeling and a common model. I talk about the kind of feeling of isolation that I had as a recruiter, or general lostness, and I wonder, as I hear you talk about the kind of that center in the brain, that seeking center in the brain, that idea of actually maybe the thing that was missing for me, the thing that was lost for me, was that ability to bring my own perspective, bring my own opinion, bring my own value to the role. And when I think we hear obviously all the time, and I talk to recruiters all the time who say, oh look, the narrative goes, we hate KPIs. The truth is, perhaps, or closer to the truth is, we hate having our role broken down into do this, do this, do this, do this. And actually what we really want is, here's the outcome, here are the steps, but actually go play with that, go iterate on that, go bring your own perspective to that, bring a lens that brings that all to life, right? And that is also, I think, the other thing that brings this to the next kind of, I guess, the next area which I want to explore with you, which is what value this creates and the kind of experiences you've had, the feedback you've had, particularly from clients. I think that maybe the candidate piece is perhaps more self-explanatory. The thing that a lot of recruiters will be thinking, listening to this, is, great, yeah, I'm gonna be like, add more perspective, add more context, go to my clients to create greater value by stepping away from the steps in my role. But like, how does that, like, A, how do I start? And B, like, is that really worth it? Because it feels so much safer to actually know what, at the end of the day, just do what I'm told and stick to the job description. And even though I know that that's inefficient, that was certainly my experience, even though I recognise that this process isn't efficient, I feel safer because the process is there for me.
Sure, absolutely. And I think we are talking about a couple of different things all in the one question. So, of course, if you work for an agency, you have to comply with their policies and their process, right? That's what you've signed up to. That's what they do. So unless you can negotiate something else with your boss, you're going to have to do that. However, I will say that there is always going to be an opportunity, and you hit the nail on the head. If you can go to your boss and talk to them about the fact that you would love to find a way to put your own spin on things, where would they be comfortable with you personalizing things, or where would they be comfortable with you implementing some of your ideas? That could definitely be an option for you, because there could be ways. But if you run your own agency or you work for yourself, I feel like that the biggest piece of value that you can add to your clients without feeling completely like you're just going way off script and like now you're just going to wing it, is have a look at the last few placements that you've made and think through the challenges that you had with your clients and why that may have been challenging. Because it's something that we are all guilty of doing, and we just go, oh my God, clients are so unreasonable. They want this and they want that, and it's just, I just have to give it to them anyway. Look, if I've had one of those conversations, I've had countless ones, right? And the reason clients are so unreasonable isn't because they just decided that's what they were going to do. There's something behind that. So what's behind it? What is their belief system or their assumption that's sitting behind it? And can you preemptively address that in your process somehow? So can you say to them, in the very first part of the process, in the past, if you're anything like the other clients that I've worked with, they feel frustrated by this, or they are challenged by that, or they believe this. And when we do it this way, they don't get the result that they want because of this thing. So the way we've designed our process is this other way. So it may seem a little unusual, but blah, 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 right? You could just start with something small like that, just to break the pattern, get them to see, oh, this person's different. Oh, they've considered this. Oh, they've thought this through. Yeah, that's exactly how I was feeling. Start to build that empathy. They start to listen to other things that you have to say, and then you can, judge the situation and see how far you can massage things in a way that is going to get them the outcome that they want. But ideally, you're going to have a methodology that you use over and over again. But if you don't feel like you are sure what that might be, this could be a good way to start.
I love it. And so much of what we've said so far, on a couple of occasions, I wanted to draw people's attention back to a previous episode of this podcast that I did with the amazing Todd Capone, who wrote a book called The Transparency Sale, and then another book more recently called The Transparent Sales Leader. Todd has a very easy to digest, but amazingly powerful and useful model for intrinsic motivation that he uses in that book. Great for recruitment leaders. It's called the praise model. So check out The Transparent Sales Leader, but also The Transparency Sale. And the reason I mentioned Todd in this context is that leading with those challenges, saying, look, you know what, we've hired several roles like this in the last 6 to 12 months. Actually, you know what? Employers tend to find these kinds of roles harder than they think to hire. Yeah. And what typically happens is X, Y, and Z. And every time that happens, it leads to delays in the hiring process. So can we have a conversation about what we can do differently here to make that work better for you? Yeah. Because we've got a couple of ideas or a few things that we've seen in the past that potentially could work for you. And actually leading with that, look, we can do it your way, but if it follows the path that we've been down previously, there may be unforeseen challenges. Or as again, a consultant that I trained last summer, we're doing an exercise on this, and he came up with this line, kind of the undiagnosed fault lines in your talent pipeline. Okay, that's really interesting. Let's have a look at what those are.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could talk about this all day, but I think once you've worked out what you feel like your process looks like and the steps that you go through, presenting that to a client on the first call is really powerful. Like when I started, I made this pivot to purely focusing on this recruitment piece in late 2020, because I had been doing it since about 2017, but I really wanted to keep focusing on my marketing business, because I was all about the brand positioning and all of that. But my clients just loved the unique way that I had started to recruit. And so they started telling each other, and then everybody wanted me to do that thing. So I had kind of accepted that, okay, this is the thing people really want. Like, I should do this thing. And when I first started, I wanted to start it just before the first lockdowns. And then, of course, lockdowns. So I kicked it off 6 months later, literally with a complete cold start. And I was doing the DENT program that we both know. And it was the first day. So the first workshop, the first day, and they had you map out your value canvas. And I got a call from an old client the following day who said, oh, you're doing that? Okay, that's great. I think I've got 2 people that would probably want to do that. Bear in mind, I'm like completely making up this whole new way to do this. And I put that little methodology together, and I explained like the before state and the after state and how I would do it, and what the common mistakes were and how we addressed those, and why that was what we did. And I got 2 clients who were both like, that makes perfect sense, completely see that, that's brilliant, yes, let's do it straight away. And for context, I don't work contingent. So even back then, I get paid at least a percentage of the fee straight away before I start.
Yeah. Well,
makes a big difference. Even now, like, just having that thing on a page, it just changes the conversation completely.
Yeah, I can imagine. And again, I think this is another step, right? This is another kind of tactical piece that we can share with recruiters, is that, yes, okay, so kind of level 1 is having that perspective. Level 2 is then asking those questions around, like, even if you haven't yet got a fully formed perspective, go and ask your clients, go and talk to them about the challenges that that similar people have faced in similar scenarios before, so you can actually talk to them about how you might proactively overcome those challenges going forwards. And then the third thing is, as you say, kind of having that methodology down on paper and saying, right, this is what we believe, and that this is what therefore that means we do. And what's really interesting about this is recruiters are really good at saying, recruiters have a really strong sense of identity about what it means to be a recruiter. Whenever I point out that recruiters all say we're strongly relationship focused and we're about providing solutions and we're about doing the right thing, that 100% is true. That's not being brought into question most of the time, right? We've all got our suspicions about our competitors when they say it, but let's just assume we're all the same and we're all in this really difficult game for something more than just a financial return. And the reason that we put up with the work and the stress and the emotional roller coaster that it often becomes is because we believe in the value of the work. Yeah. And then we say, okay, that's fine, but everyone's saying we're relationship focused, we're specialists in providing solutions, we're all about understanding our clients. We say, okay, I get all of that, but like, the next step is the most important for me, which is, what are those beliefs make you do in terms of behaviours? What do those beliefs lead you to do in terms of behaviours? A really powerful question that I ask my clients when we're looking at their delivery mechanism is, or even their sales conversations actually, is, what are the things that you do that would be easier not to do? Like, you can see a shortcut, but you're not prepared to take it because that would be, breaking with your beliefs. That would be, you don't believe you'd be doing your job properly if you took that particular shortcut. And that then is a really good identification of parts of your model that that stand up and will create value for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. The most interesting thing to me is that everybody that has used me so far, they all hate recruiters. So but the service that I provide is recruitment, just to be clear. It is different, right, from the normal process. But I think the reason that they want to come and work with me is, all of them 100% have come through referral. But the reason that they want to come and work with me is because my approach is completely different. And something that I think is lost on a lot of consultants across various disciplines is the fear that clients have of being seen to not know things that they perceive that they should know. So they will just go ahead and hire you, and they will hope that you know what has to happen and that you will do what needs to be done. So in a lot of ways, when people hire a consultant, they're not meaning to do this in a negative, like they don't have bad intentions. But what they do is they hire you to like put it on you. So they're like, okay, I've hired you. Now I'm going to leave it with you because I'm paying you. So like, do the thing. And so they'll answer the questions that you ask them, but they won't volunteer any more information. They're waiting for you to lead them. They want you to come and tell them what has to happen. But I think we as consultants, we come to the table and we don't want to seem pushy and we don't want to seem difficult. So we go, oh, I'll ask like the least amount of questions and I'll just trust that they'll just tell me if something's important, right? So the both sides are kind of guilty of not meaning to, but of making the situation kind of worse, where what clients are really looking for is someone to step into the void and say, hey, I know this is not your thing, right? This is our thing, go. So what we're going to do is this. It's going to be like this. It's going to go like that. It's going to cost this. It's going to be like this. And that's why we do it. And I break my projects down usually into 3 pieces. And the first piece is like a consulting discovery piece. The second piece is like collateral creation, role scoping, like setup. And then the final piece is actually like going to market for the role. So doing that allows the client to also build trust and work with you a bit. And they're happy to pay you for like pieces of work that they can see tangible results. And they're not like on the hook for the whole thing. But they realize that disclosing information to you and, you know, completing the assessments and the other things that whatever you may include is in their benefit. And you have to price it such that it's like both of you have a bit of skin in the game, right? You can't do like the upfront discovery for like 50 grand. They have to feel like, oh, well, you know, you're getting compensated for some of your time, but you probably wouldn't make much profit on this. Like there's not an incentive for you to just run a business doing this thing. But that really changes things. And that's why people like working with me, because I will ask them questions. Like they'll go, oh, this is a full-time role. And, you know, we think this person's going to do this and do that. And I'm like, okay, I don't really think so. Why? And what about this? And that doesn't make sense. And so you've asked for this, but you want that. Like that doesn't usually come together. Like let's really unpack that. So of course I have frameworks probably for each part of this process to get that information out of them. But yeah, it's just a different way of thinking about it. Like your client is looking for you to lead them.
Yeah, 100%. The analogy that I've got in my mind, the visual that I've got in my mind is like a kid's school disco, right? Boys on one side, girls on the other side. If I'm allowed to say that. Anyway, yes, boys on one side, girls on the other side, let's say, for example, and both sides desperately wanting to go and talk to each other, but none of them having the social tool set or skill set to be able to do that, and none of them also wanting to be the one that goes first.
Yeah.
There is an extension. There's an extension to that analogy, of course, which is the one who goes first becomes the most popular kid in the group, right? So there is this thing about actually when you're bold enough to stand out and say, look, you know, this is what I believe. This is what I want. This is what I'd like to, you know, achieve. Then all of a sudden that becomes a really powerful narrative and a really attractive conversation for people to come and have a conversation with you. And I just want to like nail that point or underscore that point because you mentioned in passing 2 really important things here. As far as I understand it, the vast majority of your work has been done on a retained basis. And as far as I understand it, the vast majority, so all of your work's on a retained basis or with payment up front. We might talk about that in a moment if we get time. So with some payment up front on a retained basis. And secondly, all of your business has come from referrals, via referrals, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah.
So therefore, you've got a business where you're doing, as far as most recruiters believe, the impossible, which is doing all of your business on a retained basis, and you are winning business without huge amounts, or in the most effective, lowest cost of sale way possible, keeping your overheads to an absolute minimum compared to a business with 20 consultants going out doing BD and picking up work on a contingent basis. So this is not only about doing recruitment that everybody loves and that is built for people and humans and clearly really rewarding work, but it's also incredibly profitable.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, the big difference with what I do and what other people do is it is holistic. So because I have a marketing background, right, it gives me, I guess, a little bit of an advantage because we do copywriting, we do design, we create collateral, we build funnels, we do customer experience type stuff. We build candidate experiences that, I mean, the best thing that I've ever had happen is a rejected candidate that I've never spoke to and did an interview, posted on LinkedIn, tagged me and thanked me for the best rejection experience ever. So, and I have one CEO candidate who just recently said he would describe being a candidate in my experience as a transformational experience that has completely changed the way that he will see recruitment in any of the businesses that he ever goes into ever again, and he will never do it the same way ever again. So like there's just lots of different feedback, you know, from candidates as well who are like, this process completely lit me up. You know, I found my dream job. It's amazing, you know, like, because it's just so different. It's just completely different. And it was hard at first to get clients to buy into it. And I did have to start with a very low price way back when in 2017, because people were like, this is completely nuts what you're doing. And I was like, yeah, I know, but it works. Like, you just have to trust me.
Yeah.
Because it's so
and I think that's also... Go on, Meqa.
No, I was going to say it's so counterintuitive because it goes against all the things that everybody accepts as the way you have to do it. And I would say as well, like whatever your niche is, like most of you will have a specialization or an industry that you work in or a role type. The questions I would be asking is, what are the things that drive those people in those role types absolutely mental? And then talk to your clients about those things and say, so see, I don't know, let's say it's HR managers or whatever, like they absolutely hate the fact that usually IT selects the ATS and usually they're never consulted and it's usually terrible and then they have to use it. And they absolutely hate the fact that, you know, the financial controller sets all of the measures of their success, which none of them are actually correlated to employees being happy or productivity, but they never feel like they can say anything. Like, speak into that and have your client address that. Have them look at that and say, yeah, that does suck. I can see how that would be shit for this person. We're going to not do that here. So then you can put that in your ad, then you can tell that to your candidates and they'll be like, oh, thank God. And like those little things just make such a big difference versus 35 bullet points of tasks. You know, it's like, it just completely changes the conversation. And just one last point before I let you ask your next question. Something that comes back into my macro view on this is employment is a relationship. It's a relationship between you and the person that you work for and your colleagues and your manager or whoever it is. But it's primarily a relationship between you and the person you report to. In big organizations, it's much more of a commercial relationship, but it's still a personal one. In smaller businesses, it's much more of a personal relationship, but with just, you know, it's a commercial one first. But if the personal element of that doesn't work, then you're going to be absolutely screwed. So you really have to think through how you are, like, what is it that you're offering someone? I call it a job worth applying for. What is that experience that person's going to have when they work for you? And how can you make that as enjoyable as possible, whilst also making sure that they get done what needs done?
Yeah. I love that.
Standing out in your sector is becoming harder than ever. Lots of people are making noise, saturating the market with the same old droll tones. So if you want to stand out, it's time to start a podcast. Yes, there's loads of podcasts out there, but how many of them are actually in your niche? Do any of them speak to your perspective on the market? I didn't think so. Podcasting not only sets you apart as an innovative thinker in your market, it is great content for repurposing. Here at SearchStat, we help you become the voice of your industry. We can stretch your content and turn it into a content goldmine, leveling up your personal brands and recruitment marketing in the process. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, to find out more, head over to searchstat.co.uk/podcast.
And I think that particular lens about breaking down how we create jobs people want to do And I know that there's more to that story as well, which perhaps we'll come back to in a future conversation. But yeah, that piece around creating environments that people want to come and work in, and work that people want to do, and thinking about championing that is a really huge part of it. I've been, over the last kind of few years, been sharing with again, clients that I take through the kind of the delivery methodology that we build. The incredible value of having leaders within the employer that they're recruiting for. So recruitment consultants going to the hiring manager and saying, look, I'd love to do short videos, just a couple of minutes, with each of the senior leaders in your team, talking about what the company mission is, why this role is important to that, what you're hoping for from that role, and why it's so important to you to get the right person for this position. Mm-hmm. What's really interesting off the back of that is you inspire candidates. First of all, they're like, oh, wow, and now I get to hear directly from senior leadership. But then you also get people who say, do you know what, actually, I'm not certain this is the role for me, because I'm not sure that I totally see the world in the same way as them. Or they say, the way that they're going about this, I've seen something similar, or we're kind of doing the same thing at my current business. So I'm happier staying where I am. So we get this kind of this really good kind of disqualification process off the back of people understanding what the business is thinking up front. And when you then go on to look at how that affects retention and quality of hire, and actually time to impact, which is another great measure, it just has a really, really big effect.
You've just hit on one of my favorite things to do. So one of the first steps that I have in my process is to polarize people. So the first thing you want to do with the job ad is you want hell yes or hell no. You don't want people to read it and be like, I'm not really sure. It's like, you want people to go, oh my God, get me away from this place, or I can't wait to work there. And then, as I said, we do things a little bit differently. So I do build landing pages and opt-ins and packs and all sorts of things, because it's like a marketing process. But video is big, and we've always used it. I have sometimes brought in professional video crews to come and do, depending on the role and the business, but other times just, speak to camera stuff. It absolutely changes the game for some of the reasons that you mentioned, but also because you know yourself, when you walk into a room, you sometimes get a visceral feeling that I could not work with that person, like within the first 2 minutes, for whatever reason. And it's not about discrimination. It's just like the way they speak, or their tone, or their principles, or their mannerisms. You're just like, I couldn't be around this person. And vice versa. Like, it could be the candidate, it could be the boss, it could be. So the video thing really helps you with that. So people self-select out, instead of coming in to waste your time and then smiling and nodding, and then it's like, then they just ghost you. So yeah, video is massive. If you think about it again, back to what we were just saying, it's a relationship. You've got to come and work there. You've got to feel like, oh, this is the kind of place I would want to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, I think that technology kind of enables us to do so much more in that space. And this comes back to your original point, I think, around going back to those base principles, thinking about how can we solve this experience? How can we solve the experience? Where, as you mentioned earlier, I kind of let it go, but let's come back to it. Like, so many people that you work with say they hate recruiters, and that isn't, and I want to be really clear about that. That isn't a personal thing. It's a process thing, right?
100%.
It's about solving the process, solving the experience of recruitment, in the same way that people have similar feelings about. I don't want to go across too many industries here, but the one that always comes to mind is estate agents, right? Is this kind of the similar kind of experience. And the two things that come to mind for me, or the thing that comes to mind for me that unifies both of those, is that taking a job and moving house are both are individually some of the biggest emotional investments that anyone will ever make, and yet they're dealt with like a logical transaction.
Sure.
Right? And so it's like so there's a big part of that too.
Look, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest things that we're up against too is this phenomenon called recursive knowledge, which has been well studied. It basically means that you know what you know so well that you forget that other people don't know it. So
Mhm.
recruiters and maybe real estate agents and we all are guilty of at different times. They lead with things like our fee. Our fee is X percent, and it's lower than the other guy. Or we have a guarantee, and it's better than the other guy, whatever. But you haven't first built the value in what you do. So there's an assumption on the other part of what that is. And if you don't clarify that, if you don't have that model or that methodology to create that shared agreement about what that value is, then it doesn't matter what your fee is, because it could be twice that and it could be fine with the client, or it could be half that and that could still not be low enough, because it's all about perceived value, right? So we don't build that value in the industry. It's just an assumed like, well, we'll recruit for you, and they talk about the mechanics of that, like the guarantee period or the percentage or whatever, versus first building the value for the client. So I think that's a big part of why there's that perception that people hate recruiters.
Yeah. Friend of the show, I think it's fair to say, John Brooks loves to point out as part of his process when he onboards clients. He says, number one, is your service comparable or better than your competitors? And most recruiters will say, I think it probably is better. And then he asks, are your fees bigger or comparable to your competitors? And most people will say, well, they're comparable. So then unless you have a dialogue that sits outside of what you cost and how you operate, unless you have a conversation around that is outside of your terms and talks about how you operate, all you're saying to your client, or all your client will know, is you are the same as them because you charge the same as them. Your client is looking at a spreadsheet going 18%, 18%, 15%, not this is what we get for not Ferrari, Toyota, Kia, right? It's like it's a very different kind of thought process that people go through when they look at pricing and how this ties up.
And we can
I
apply
did also want to come.
Sorry, you're bang on. And just to add, we can apply just about every single thing that we have talked about and every single principle to the way that candidates view jobs.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that. Go on.
Well, I like to simplify it by saying that jobs are products. Candidates are customers. So recruitment is sales and marketing mixed together. I'm not big on the whole concept of an employer brand. I think it's been overblown in terms of its value. I think people see through a lot of the nonsense. I do feel like, though, that people are not stupid and they will go and look. So they'll see your business name maybe in the ad, and they will go and look on LinkedIn. They'll go and see who the people are that work for that business. What are they kind of posting? What does the business page post? They might read Glassdoor reviews and things, but people are pretty skeptical. They know that you can massage that stuff. They might look at your careers page. Like, most people aren't stupid enough to just go, oh, look, I read one yesterday, dynamic, innovative, great culture. And you're like, every single thing about this is bog standard. Everything about what you do, how you do it, everyone that does it, the words are even the same as everyone else. I'm like, no one's reading that and going, oh, this is amazing. Like, you're not reading like British Airways freaking brochure and going, oh, this is so good. Like, I believe everything about it. You're not. So I think people need to focus much more on what they're actually doing. What is the organization actually doing, right? But recruiters can't control that. Well, they can give their clients that advice. And they can say to their clients, what we've found is that we have a lot more success when what candidates actually find out is the same as what you're saying. So it's best not to say stuff that would be contradictory to what they find, because I think there's also this belief with employers and recruiters that you have to make things look better than they are, where the research actually shows that's the exact opposite thing you should do. So you have to build the value for the candidate in the role in the same way that you have to build the value for the client, because if they see job title, like HR manager full time, how much would that be paid? Like £60,000 or something? Like, I don't know what your UK salaries are, but let's say it was that.
Yeah,
that's exactly the same as every other job they're seeing, except it might be £62,000 or £58,762 or some ridiculous stupid thing. So then they start looking, okay, well, where is it? Like, is it closer to home? Or is it, oh, well, what are they asking? Oh, I think I've done that before. Or, oh, well, you get it down for your birthday. And it's like, there's a belief that those things are important. They're not, but that's all you're giving them. It's a bit like your fees. That's not actually the most important thing, but that's all you're putting in front of them. So people will tell you that's why, or that's what they're looking for. So, when recruiters go out and do BD and they go, oh, well, I have to drop my fees because people want the fees to be lower. They want the fees to be lower because they've got nothing else to evaluate what you're doing. If you showed them a whole process that was value packed and that they were like, oh, this is amazing, they wouldn't care what the fee was as long as it's, reasonable to the value you're creating. It's the same with candidates. Like you're not going to attract top talent or like get the people that you're really looking for if your job on the surface of it is just about the same as someone else's. You've got to humanize it. You've got to speak into the void of what that person is really looking for. And most people want to play to their strengths. Most people want a chance to put their stamp on something and make an impact. Most people want a chance to progress their lives in the direction that they want to go. They want to be seen as a human being, not like, oh, well, we will allow you to occasionally work from home. It's like, but we still don't recognize that you're an individual and care about you and try and help you. Like the businesses that recognize that opportunity, it is literally like unicorn magnets, right? So, that's how it's the same.
Yeah, I love that. And you're talking about that idea of an understanding of kind of jobs as product and also what candidates really want. I think you layer those two elements of intrinsic drivers but also packaging really, really well together. But again, we talked about this offline, and I think it's so important. You mentioned the questions and the approach and the things that recruiters can and can't do, right? So recruiters can't maybe change the model of the way they recruit, although even that, for a lot of people listening to this, I think there are steps that we can take. But actually, the steps we take are defined by the conversations we have, and the steps we take for so many recruiters are defined by the questions you ask your clients. So when you start asking the questions and leading with the challenges and talking to them openly about the difficulties they're likely to encounter, you can get your client ultimately to do what you want to do, because what you want to do is place that role as quickly as possible with a good person, and what they want to do is fill that role as quickly as possible with a good person. But in letting them lead and saying to them, so tell me how are you going to recruit this? What's your recruitment process? You lose control over that, and you therefore lose all of the value over it. Now the client owns the process and is outsourcing the administration of the process, rather than the alternative, which is you take more control or more leadership over the process, and your client feel like, wow, we're getting something really valuable here, which is a project management and the support that we actually really need. We're actually getting more help towards a truly impactful commercial outcome, rather than someone to just run a process for us.
100%. And I think, ways to add more value to a client are things like offering coaching and training to hiring managers in, what their role actually is in the scoping process, actually talking to them more about their expectations, making sure that those are realistic, because the reality is recruitment is a gateway to performance. And unfortunately, when we, as recruiters, we focus on the recruitment part, and we're not there for the performance part. So oftentimes it's like a baton race, and so we're like, done, like now it's your problem. But we're setting them up for success or failure based on the way that we help them to understand what needs to be done. Now, you can't always make them do it, right? But you can say, there's two ways we can do this. We can do it this way, and we can do that, and we can put this out there, and we can try that. But I don't think that's going to work because of these reasons, and this is what's going to happen. So what we suggest is that we do it this way, because in our experience, then this happens and then this happens, and that's what you want. It's going to take a little bit longer to do this one, and it's maybe going to cost a little bit more money up front, but then down the track, it's going to deliver massive returns for these reasons, or whatever it is. Like, it's our job to acknowledge that that's the situation and to help set it up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if I was a recruiter listening to this at the start or the middle of my career, I'd be feeling nervous about having these conversations. I'd be feeling worried that I might outstretch my realm of kind of influence or confidence. The only thing that I can say, and I think we'd both say to everybody listening to this, is go and ask the questions, go and have the conversations. And if your client turns around and asks you to do something that you're not confident about doing, then talk to them about why that is and what that looks like. We are now going into a space where, and we're already in a time where the dynamics of employment are getting shifted and moving so quickly and changing so rapidly. Employers feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
Candidates feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so the opportunity for recruiters like you, Meqa, and everybody listening to this to kind of step up and really truly add value. I think we hear that term add value so much, and none of us really know ever what it means. But in this instance, I really very specifically mean taking control of the consultation process, really giving your client insight and feedback and context with which to make decisions.
Yep.
Recruiters who do that, particularly with an amazing perspective and productization that you've built with the Unforgettable agency and all of the approaches that you have, just stand to win so big, and maybe we should prove this by building something together that will have a really big impact on the industry.
Pretty good conversation about how that might happen. So if we get to do that, that'll be awesome. I hope we can talk to you next time about how that's happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So watch this space, guys. A couple of things that you'll need to go and do now. You'll need to go and connect with Meqa on LinkedIn and find out a little bit more about her. Well, she's got some great videos on there which will talk to you or explain a little bit more about the inspiring process. She also shares great content consistently. We've mentioned a few other resources here as well today. Meqa, you mentioned the DEMP program, which I didn't come back to. That, of course, is Daniel Priestley's program. You've done a couple of other dance programs, am I right?
I did the Key Person of Influence program. It was like from late 2020 to early 21. I actually did their Startup Accelerator, which is based in the UK, which is, for anybody who's like starting out. The Key Person of Influence is more for somebody who's already kind of, making six figures and wants to take it up a notch. I probably did it a bit too early, to be honest. But you learn so much from that program. I can highly recommend it. I think Startup Accelerator is about £6,000.
Okay.
KPI is it's $17,000. It was when I did it, so I don't know what that is in pounds. Like maybe half of that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the stuff that they teach you is phenomenal. But you do have to have an idea of what you want to do. So Startup Accelerator might be better if people are interested in that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, in general, go check out Daniel Priestley's work, and we may well be doing something either on the Key Person of Influence book, the oversubscribed book, or maybe even with Dan himself if we can get him on the show in future. Really big influences for me and all of the people that I work with too. We also mentioned the episode of Recruiting Better with Todd Capone, which I recommend people go and check out. Todd talks about the praise model, which is a model for intrinsic motivation, and also the transparency sale, which is all about leading with your flaws and creating conversations around that. And of course, the other thing that ties into this so nicely is my interview with Anthony Iannarino in this series of the podcast, where we really talk about what it means to bring a consultative lens, context shift for your clients, and bring perspective to their conversations too. So we continue to be a source of inspiration and insight for recruiters everywhere around these particular topics. Meqa, you've done an amazing job of articulating this. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I am ever so grateful to you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great being here, and I hope that I've been able to catalyze a couple of good ideas that were just lurking under the surface for people, and spark them into actually going and put them into action.
I'm sure you have, and I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's feedback on how they've enjoyed the show too. Talking of which, if you are a follower of the show, please do head over and give us a review, hit the rating button, let us know what you think. All of your feedback really helps us shape and direct the show going forwards. So I hope I can count on you to leave a review and let us know your thoughts. That's it for this show. So Meqa, thank you, and I will see the rest of you next time.
Just one last thing from me. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, hit like, hit follow, and consider leaving a review. Your feedback is really greatly appreciated. We're still looking to perfect the format and to think about how we can make this show even more valuable for all of our audience. So as you leave feedback, we pick it up and we'll be including it in everything we do going forwards. And if you want to get closer to the show, to ask me questions or hear about upcoming guests and put questions to them, then head to the show notes where you'll find a link to the Recruiting Better community. From there, you'll be able to get our newsletter with regular updates and send me any messages or feedback that you want me to receive.